Welcome on a Monday night to Generation Movie. My name is JW Colwell. I am your host tonight. I am terribly vexed. Please welcome to my wonderful co-host and partner in crime on this endeavor, Rich Drees, film buff from FilmBuff Online. Rich Drees, how are you doing tonight?
What we podcast will echo through eternity tonight.
Okay,
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to having this discussion.
It should be a good night. We have a guest tonight. We have a guest.
Yes. Very excited.
But before we do the guest, let's remind everybody of what we do. And she's not going to point or anything tonight. Usually she points and stuff. She's got a beautiful setup going in her house right now. We're very excited to have Natasha Bogutzki joining us tonight. Of course, the co-host of the Big Picture podcast that you're also on. But we want to talk a little bit about our YouTube channel, the Indie Escape Network. All of our episodes are on the YouTube channel. And you can find almost all of the other episodes for all the other shows that are on the Indie Escape Network. Big deal going on. We have a lot of stuff going on. YouTube is a great place to find all of our stuff. Also, if you like Facebook and you feel like it's being run a little bit better than some of the other internet sites in the world, we also have a Facebook page on the Indie Escape Network on Facebook, so you can find us there as well. And chances are you're either watching us there or on YouTube right now. So thank you for joining us. This is a live discussion, so we can have a lively debate. Super excited to be here tonight. And without further ado, or without further ado, I want to welcome to the podcast Natasha Bogutzki in her best Connie Nielsen outfit, surrounded by Roman candles. Warm welcome to the Big Picture Podcast co-host Natasha Bogutzki. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
She is a big fan of Gladiator. And so we decided long ago when we were hatching this idea of doing the Oscar Decade Cavalcade that officially ends tonight. Tonight's our last Oscar Decade Cavalcade until we decide to do this wacky mess next year again.
I don't know if we decided so much as I mentioned it to her and she threatened my life and saying, you better let me on the show that night.
Is she violent? Are you violent?
No, but
are you the kind of like cheater that would like stick somebody in their back right before they go on to gladiatorial combat? Are you a Joaquin Phoenix kind of girl?
No, I'm definitely pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Okay. So Cersei, more Cersei. Okay.
Well,
We're crossing our.
Get the Senate on my side before staging a coup. Get
fair.
Get religion. Get the Senate. Get the army. You're good.
Again, sounds very Cersei-ish. Some comments. Starting tonight. Ken McKernan. Good evening, friends. Good evening, Ken.
Hey,
good to have you back.
Good evening, Ken.
Molly Zombie. New. Hello. Hi. How are you? Welcome in your dead or undead state, whatever it may be. JW, bro, a PopCon is happening this weekend. Joe and I are going, and this is, I believe, John or Heather who are running a PopCon. Happy to have them here. Ken McKernan says Natasha with an exclamation point, like Natasha. Very, very interesting. Good evening, lady and gentlemen. Glad to see Natasha on here. She did. She definitely ups the quotient for us. Like usually it's just two schlubs talking about movies on a Monday, but she's all dressed up and stuff. Like I didn't get the memo apparently. She was like setting candles in the background and everything. I'm like, I have my dad's thing up here and I have like toys. Wasn't a good look for me to be honest as a host of a show. Molly says I'm good. Okay, so she's either one. And then this is a PopCon. It is John. Now she's changing her mise en place. Now she's changing her scene up.
I'm a big nervous wreck, okay? And
there's no reason to be a nervous wreck. It's just me and Rich you're talking to.
I know, but I've never done this with
and 7 other people all over the place online.
Hi everyone. You're watching me try to figure out how to podcast.
Yeah, no pressure. It's no pressure.
Okay, the symmetry is still there. Good.
Probably should have done it earlier.
This way. Here.
Now I just want to see Gladiator by Wes Anderson.
I already made that joke.
She already made that joke.
You weren't there for it.
You missed it. You missed it early.
Yeah, I was running late.
So usually we talk about news of the day beforehand, but I think it's really funny that today's main news story, all over the place. Yeah, but here's the thing. Rich and I, first off, we just had a bunch of things happen where we did an episode of Loud and Nerdy a couple months ago where we were talking about different streamers, and then Variety all of a sudden had a giant streamer article, and we were like, that's kind of ridiculous. But today's big news, and we'll talk about it more in Legacy, obviously, but Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian, The Last of Us, big star.
Man of the hour.
The man of the hour, the person, if you have children of any age or race that need to be saved, he's your guy. He is in talks to star in Gladiator 2, or whatever they're calling it. Gladiator Again, or Gladiator Reborn, or whatever the hell they're gonna more flying tiger death.
Gladiator murder.
Gladiator, not Spencer Tree Clark in the lead.
Stoic Gladiator 2, where we're just kind of like, what's your frame of reference for acting? I'm just gonna look at the camera and have a really kind of like meh face on. How's it gonna work out for you? I'm gonna win an Oscar. Anyway, but I think it's big news in the sense because this movie has kind of like it stopped and started and stopped and started, but now they've kind of filled it out with Oscar nominees and people that are like Pascal is kind of microwave, nuclear hot right now. Paul Mescal, who also had an Academy Award nomination this year. Barry Keoghan, who's
Paul
very
Mescal just won his first Laurence Olivier Award for Best Actor about a month ago.
Right, and they got this unknown young guy this guy named Denzel Washington, who's gonna come out of the woodwork. I don't know where he's from or haven't really heard of him. But now it's all of a sudden like it looks like it's going to get filmed rather quickly and then released in 2024.
Connie is back to play Lucilla. We also have Joseph Quinn, otherwise known as Eddie Munson from Stranger Things, joining the cast as well.
Yeah, this is a hot cast. I'm not going to lie. Keoghan looks like he's going to be the villain, which makes sense for this particular franchise. You need like a snivelly, tiny villain. It's an interesting thing. It's dated for November 22nd, 2024. Paramount, which doesn't really like to get into spending a lot of money on things right now. They kind of just make things and then push them out. And hey, if it made money, that's great. If it didn't, it goes right to Paramount Plus. So I'm just curious. With this news dropping today, Pascal big enough for your Russell Crowe needs?
Well, he's not the lead, so.
By the time we get there, he'll probably be the lead.
I doubt it. I think Paul Mescal is slated to play Lucius Ferris. And from earlier drafts of the script, the film centers around a grown-up Lucius. So it's still sticking with that original idea and plot, which makes sense considering Paul was the first thrown out.
This is an interesting production topic we're going to talk about. You mean there's a finished script?
During development years ago.
There's a whole finished script, like a whole script that's done?
I don't know. I don't work for Paramount.
Well, I'm making a joke. I'm making a joke about the movie we're talking about tonight. We're talking about Gladiator
tonight. They didn't have an original finished script during shooting. I'm very much aware of the mythos of Gladiator.
Yeah, well, that's what I was. But people who are watching the show aren't. We're gonna talk. This is going swimmingly, Rich. Making a joke, but yeah, I think it's an interesting cast. I think it's an interesting choice. Let's see. Kathy writes, "Yay, more Pedro." I think we will get eventually to the point where it's too much, Pedro. But we'll see what happens. Sylvester Stallone returning for cliffhanger reboot. I think he's getting too old for action type movies. Yeah, that's another weird story of the day. We're doing a sequel to a movie that bankrupted Carolco in the 90s. And was a big hit, but isn't like, I don't know. It's like, for me, this is going to date me. And also, it's no Tango and Cash, people.
Oh, wow.
It's no Tango and Cash, which is a terrible Stallone movie and is a fantastic, wonderful, gleaming bad cinema. Just wonderful. But yeah, cliffhanger reboot. I don't know. Is it too late? Also, that movie is very specific. There's a dread moment in the first part of the movie. He has to overcome the dread moments to beat like a scowling John Lithgow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Lithgow's fun in it, but he's fun in everything. But yeah, this could be one of those movies where I honestly think I'd rather be more interested in hoping that the villain is good than in what Stallone's character.
Well, and also like they're going to be filming in the Italian Alps, and I looked at that and I went, okay, so we're literally going to burn money. We're just going to burn money on this movie.
Stallone signed up for the free trip to Italy.
But they should just let him in for free at this point. He's a national
that's
true.
mascot.
Well, he is, but he's on a hot streak. But it's also the kind of thing where I just like, of all the movies you want to reboot, I don't know that Cliffhanger is like, Cliffhanger to me is a very one-shot movie. It is very self-contained. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's a perfect action movie, but it is a self-contained action movie. In which case,
it depends on how it's done. Using this as an example,
the son of John Lithgow.
Hang on.
Yes.
No one thought that we needed to see a musical of Mr. Saturday Night, a very failed Billy Crystal movie from the 90s, which honestly you can't rent anywhere. The only way that you can watch it is if you actually just purchase the damn thing on Amazon Prime. The musical is 1,000 times better than the movie ever was. So,
Cliffhanger the musical?
I'm not saying musical, but I'm just saying sometimes when you go back to revisit things 20, 30 years later, it has a freshness, a newness to it. It'll still connect with the audience who saw the original film, but you can bring a hot take, completely revamp it.
I agree. I think that the connections need to be the connections to the movies that you're going to reboot 30 years after the fact have to be, and I think this is all because of Top Gun Maverick, but I think the connections to the movies that you're rebooting have to be so strong that they're immense. Like,
I disagree entirely.
Really?
Yes. Because you're looking, when you're trying to reboot a already standard IP, and Rich and I have had this discussion before.
No.
Interesting.
It is.
So I'm sitting back.
It's not just about trying to connect with the people who saw the original. I'm sorry, no offense. With all due respect to a lot of our viewers and to these wonderful two gentlemen I'm sitting with, you guys are getting up in fucking years. They want the IP to still exist years and years later. So it has to be fresh. It has to be updated. You need to grab a younger audience who are going to go back and revisit the old stuff, bring in more money, and we can create more franchise work.
But doesn't that initial doesn't have to be greatness to fall into that category?
No, it does not. I think sometimes if you.
But I'll give you an example of great things that have been made that haven't lasted through. Like, very few people would question the ties everybody has to Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. But Blade Runner 2049 comes out with all the shiny bells and whistles that you could possibly ask for. Great director, great young actor, two great young actors, actually, and a hook and tie where you have Harrison Ford. But it doesn't connect.
It was actually, I think Blade Runner 2049 didn't connect with a lot of the major audiences, But for the film people, it sat with them for years and years and years. It got better the longer it was like a DVD release.
Yeah, sure. I'm just, my thing is, when you're doing these reboots of movies that are 30 years old, I feel like the hooks have got to be standard. They have to be beyond standard. So that's why Top Gun Maverick works. Like, it works because there are still people from 1986 who look at that movie as one of the greatest movies they ever saw. They joined the Air Force because of it, or they joined the military because of it. And so they release it 36 years later, and then it hits with the next generation because they put it all together. But I just don't look at Cliffhanger as one of those movies. Like, I think it's a good movie.
I don't think it's a good movie. I think we're constantly hearing the case of, oh, Hollywood's run out of ideas. They're constantly rebooting and rehashing old material. But the younger audiences won't recognize this as original IP until after the fact. So it'll grab them as, for them, something original. Because the older audience, who didn't really much care for the original, won't go see it.
Oh, no, it was a hit.
The new audience will think it's something new, so they will. It'll create this, if it's good, word of mouth creates more interest in not only going to see the current, but also the original. I think if it's done right, anything can be a hit, even in today's climate. It's just, how do you go about doing it uniquely?
Okay. We have comments. So let's see. Here's a good one. Gladiator 2, Pedro takes Lucius under his wing. They go on a grand adventure to build the Roman Republic. Sorry, we crossed our metaphors there. Fubar, I think he's Joe. I think you're talking about the new Schwarzenegger show. Point would be Stallone gets stuck in a rock wall at Chuck E. Cheese, or he gets stuck in a walker. One or the other. Do we really need these reboots? I think that's the better question. I think the reboots are not necessarily for our creative visions. They're more for, they are a generation of money. They view IP and view the reboots as, do I go with something original where I might lose 20 million, or do I go with something I know is going to have an opening and may not be the best product? Is where we're at.
Well,
I don't think we need a reboot. Sorry, go ahead, Rich.
Okay. At CinemaCon this past week, one of the studio heads, and I'm blanking on which one it was now, said, I think it might have been the guy at Universal or Sony, I can't remember. He said, what we're trying to do is balance between original material and franchise. Franchise, we know we can get, certain types of, certain amounts of return on. Originals are a little bit more dicey from a business standpoint, but original films are the birth of franchises of tomorrow. So if you don't want to get stale in just certain amount of franchises, you still have to have new original films to kind of refresh the franchising. It's a weird, delicate balance that they're trying to strike here with all these different types of films. And I mean, yeah, I'm all for that. I wish he'd addressed a little bit more maybe of going back to like mid-range dramas and comedies and things like
comedies,
that. All that
Tim writes,
unfortunately.
Tim writes, I prefer a remake of the Stallone Rutger Hauer film Nighthawks. That is a great, wonderful point. It is an underrated gem of the 80s. I think that's the other thing where, and I don't think I disagree with Natasha at all. I think I agree with you totally that you could get a hit out of these things. But what I would say, I think it's more interesting, and Rich and I have had this discussion on this show. I would prefer if you remade a crappy movie. Something that was a good idea that was like botched. And
give it new life.
Yeah, give it new life. Yeah. Cliffhanger isn't one of those movies, though. Cliffhanger is, I remember working at Blockbuster, and Cliffhanger did very well on video, and it did all, it's fine. But today, reading about it, going, is this the Stallone movie you want rebooted?
I'm going to be completely honest. I've
never seen. You've never seen Cliffhanger?
I've never even heard of it.
It was a comeback 90s movie. Wow, that is Well, I showed her my Trick or Treat doll.
I know Trick or Treat. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean I don't.
I showed her my Trick or Treat doll, and she's like, "I've never seen that movie." I'm like, "Jesus, we are old, Rich. We've seen way too many of these movies."
Rich knows I can school him any day when it comes to certain movies.
Interesting.
True.
JW was killing me. I mentioned Tango and Cash Fubar. Fucked up beyond all recognition. I'm sorry. There's also a Schwarzenegger show coming out called Fubar. So that's just me being up on my pop culture, Joe. I am so sorry. But yes, Tango and Cash also had Fubar. Would rather see Cobra redone. Another Stallone movie from the 80s that actually was not a great movie, but had a great hook and could have been something. It could have been a contender had they not cut it to pieces and ribbons when they released it. Have you heard of Cobra?
No.
Crime is a Disease, Meet the Cure? Really? No? One of the great poster taglines of all time? Give me a second.
I told you there's a generational gap.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
I feel old.
Which is what I enjoy about when Natasha and I do our podcast, because frequently, we're coming at things with two different sets of references.
And that's part of why I love her. I love the podcast. So, but yeah, it is definitely. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Sometimes these things come up and they must be acknowledged in some way. I have this poster in my possession, Rich Drees.
Of course you do.
Well, my dad ran a theater, and so but this poster was the glossiest of glossy posters. Like, it has a sheen on it that rivals like turtle wax. Like, it just okay. So
my husband's forehead.
There it is. Look at the gun. Look at the Stallone. Look at the glasses. Look at the greatest tagline for the worst movie ever made.
Tagline: its quality is inverse to the movie's quality.
Yes, but in what Tim was saying though, like, there are Stallone movies that I would like a reboot to, that are interesting movies that he's like. Nighthawks is an interesting movie. Cobra is an interesting movie that failed. And in 1986, actually,
Cliffhanger has a nice enough, interesting character arc for Stallone. It starts off, and since if Natasha hasn't seen it, and there's probably others who are watching who might not have seen it, I'm not going to say how, but I thought it has a slam banging opening.
The opening is amazing.
Oh, holy shit! Yeah,
it's well done.
At the Gateway in Kingston, and going, oh my God.
It has a great opening. It has Stallone being Stallone-ish, and then it's broken, and then it becomes a die-hard-ish action flick. Yeah. With mountains and guns.
And the thing, though, is if you're going to do a sequel to that, like I said, you're going to need to find somebody who can be as at least an interesting villain as John Lithgow was, and that's a tall order.
Because he was all over it. He was crazy.
It's John.
Wait, we got another one, and then we're going to get to Gladiator. They should reboot Escape from New York. Brandon Michael, that movie is always
absolutely not. It's perfect the way it is.
It is perfect the way it is, but I don't want a reboot of Escape from New York. I want another Snake Plissken movie. That we can have an older Snake Plissken movie. We can definitely have.
I've read at least one draft of an attempted remake of Escape from New York. It's a good thing that this just remained in development hell. It was fine. It didn't have any charm. It didn't have any zip or viver to it. It felt standard.
There's always talk about a reboot or a sequel to Escape from New York after Escape from LA, the way Escape from LA ends, where he basically ends the entire world's technology. And having a Snake Plissken walking around in a gunslinging Western world would be kind of cool in the sci-fi future. But
here's a question for you two gents.
Okay.
If you had to look at a modern actor who had the joie de vivre of Kurt Russell, who do you think it would be?
That's the real fucking problem. That's the real problem. And much of what we talked about Tango and Cash, and we talked about Escape from New York, the only real Kurt Russell replacement is Kurt Russell.
Cloning Kurt Russell.
Yeah, we need to clone Kurt Russell. How about you go?
Harrison Ford is pretty much.
How about you go with something smart? If you're going to reboot a Snake Plissken movie, you go with something smart and you hire his kid. That'd be a lot of pressure, though.
Here's an off-the-wall suggestion, and I may be full of stuff and nonsense here, but how about Jesse Plemons?
Plemons is interesting. I would also like Plemons. Plemons would be really interesting.
Natasha is totally against this. I can see this.
You don't like the Plemons?
I like Jesse Plemons. I just don't think he's right for it.
Well, and
I think he would make a meal out of it.
Actually, somebody brought this up. What if Pedro plays Pliskin? Now Pedro right now has the kitsch going on. I'm gonna say also somebody like. How about like? I'm also trying to take people out that Rich and I have discussed for Bond. So I'm trying to, because some people are going to be cut up for 12 years. I don't know. Like, how about like Poe Dameron himself? But he's really busy.
I thought about Oscar Isaac, but yeah,
Oscar Isaac might be a really good case. Mm-hmm. There are people that are possible for Pliskin, but that character is so genetically Kurt Russell, and you know,
how do you do it without doing an impersonation?
I don't know, but that's interesting. Like I know that what was it? Was it the guy from Game of Thrones was rumored at some point, and I'm not talking about like any of the main, like what is it, what is his name? Nicholas.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Jamie.
He was up. I know at some point he was up for it.
I could see it. I could sort of see it a little.
Nicholas Hoult. How about Nicholas Hoult? That's another under the radar.
Okay.
Kind of like somebody that you could build into this character.
I mean, if you want somebody who's just like really muscly and exudes a lot of machismo, I would almost say let's look to some of the Bollywood action actors like AJ Devan or like Salman Khan. I think those guys would be interesting choices as well. Probably not familiar to too many of our viewers right now, but you know, I've been kind of doing a bit of a dive into Indian cinema over the last couple of years, especially the action movies.
Another interesting one would be Scott Eastwood.
I did think Scott Eastwood for a second.
The problem with that is, I feel like a Escape from New York reboot is a 2 or 3 picture deal, because if they ever get it and make it, it's going to be one of those things. Brandon, right? What about Tom Hardy? I think he's too old to play Snake.
Too gruff.
Just not the right gruff. Snake is quick with his tongue, and Tom Hardy goes very slow.
He's a thug.
Yeah. But that's not a bad idea. Hardy could definitely like look great with the eye patch and the long hair, and but things that don't have long patches and eye patches and long hair. We have to get to the production of this movie that we're working on tonight. It is Gladiator. It is the year 2000. It is, and I can't find the picture as I block us all. I completely block Natasha out, which is, again, a detriment to us and the rest of the show. A Hero Will Rise, Russell Crowe, Gladiator, May 2000. So we're 23 years in on this experiment. And so, Natasha,
yes,
one of the things we do on the show, and Rich and I, when we're talking about production, I try to find a weird story going on about the production, about like some sort of, like, what is the Rosetta Stone of this production? And the one that popped up everywhere I looked was not my cough. The idea that there was no script.
Yep.
That they were writing 3 or 4 pages a night. And I think it's one of the most interesting things that everybody in this movie said yes before getting a full script, right? Everybody said yes. Do you want to work with Ridley Scott? Yes. Do you want to work with Ridley Scott about ancient Rome? Yes. And I just think it's the most interesting story that, do you have a script? No. Explain this to me. Explain the concept of being an actor and going in and realizing there's no script.
First, for me, the first thing I always ask is, or tell someone is, send me the script. Show me the script. I don't sign on the jack shit before I see a script. However, Ridley Scott
hasn't called, I guess. Hasn't called yet.
Pardon?
Ridley hasn't called yet.
Well,
because I think that's a yes.
Time, Ridley wasn't just hot shit. He had proven himself an artist, and not only focused on his world building as much as his characters, but he really brought a life to them that I think was a little hard to find in major like box office. And then you're also looking at the idea of the sand and sandals epics, which we hadn't had one for how many years?
40. Let's go 40.
Exactly. So
where they mattered.
To be able to delve into that kind of world, which no one had touched in a very long time. It's when I think about Russell Crowe signing on to do LA Confidential. LA Confidential, Curtis Hanson chose a lot of actors out of Australia, people who weren't very well known at the time, such as Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe. But he was doing a noir in the time period, which is not something we had had for a very long time. He pitched the hell out of that to get it even started. So look at Gladiator. I'm sure Ridley Scott didn't have to pitch as hard.
Well, no, and so one of the things that comes up about the script that when you're reading about it is that it's bouncing around, and it's basically Franzoni is a writer that basically was working at that point for DreamWorks, David Franzoni, and he was working for DreamWorks. He had written Amistad, and he had a 3-picture deal with DreamWorks, and basically he came in one day and he said, he went on a whirlwind trip, and he's like, I read this book, and he's talking to Spielberg, and he's like, well, I read this book while I was on vacation it was called Those Are About to Die, which is a 1958 novel. Because again, we haven't had any sword and sandal things since the 50s and 60s. And basically it inspired him to go to Spielberg and say, hey, do you think there'd be any interest at DreamWorks with this? And Spielberg, being Spielberg, said, loving the past, loving film history, said, go write it and bring it in. If it's about ancient Rome, I'm sure somebody will want to do it. Right? And he said, yes. He said, yeah, let's do it. But I think it's interesting is even when they do that, there are script doctors on this film from the get-go. There are people working on different versions of the script. John Logan comes in, who's a very, very big script doctor for DreamWorks, who comes in when things are out of hand. And he basically, as he's writing the script and assembling the script, the Franzoni's dialogue is not great. And there are actors and actresses reading the dialogue going, this is terrible, including Connie Nielsen, who says, there's at one point, there was something in the script that basically didn't exist in ancient Rome. And, Franzoni had it in the script, and she's like, I can't say this. And Ridley Scott's like, why? And she's like, well, they didn't have museums. Like, he talks about a museum in one part of the script. And she's like, they didn't have museums in ancient Rome. We have museums about ancient Rome, but they didn't have them. And so there's all kinds of little, inaccuracies. John Logan is also the one that doctors the script to the point where, spoiler alert, the movie's 23 years old. So if we're going to fight about it, we're going to fight. But Logan rewrites all of the first act, and he makes the very interesting decision to to add a revenge subplot where Maximus's wife and child are murdered at the hands of the Praetorians. All John Logan, heavy-handed, very right in par. And so I think it's an interesting
but also
thing.
It's a very classical theme from ancient Greek literature and things like that, of a man who has been wronged and is seeking the revenge. And so all these things.
Well, I think that's it's perfect. I think it's why it connects. And thinking about movies from the 50s and 60s, the one that this movie kind of emulates, and actually I saw with my dad at the Kirby Center, and Spartacus is the one that you can't get out of your head when you're watching this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But when they're doing this,
the Gladiators, little.
Yeah, well, and it has like an actor, emulating and becoming bigger than he is. But Franzoni originally wanted Antonio Banderas for the lead. But at that point, like you were talking about, LA Confidential, it hit. And also at that point, Crowe is filming The Insider. So he's completely bald and he's 100 pounds overweight. But Michael Mann talks him into doing it, saying yes. It's $100 million Gladiator film, and you're going to go to Italy and be directed by Ridley Scott. You're saying yes, which I think is hilarious. It's one of the funniest. I don't feel like a gladiator right now, Michael. Yeah, that's great. Get your ass on a plane as soon as you're done and film the movie.
One thing too about the script and the constant rewrites during production and everything, and everybody's dissatisfaction. Obviously, Russell Crowe himself was very vocal about it. The movie's on his shoulders, so he, I think, had every right to have these concerns and to be expressing them, because he's the one who's going to catch the shit if it didn't turn out the way it did. And this kind of started that whole Russell Crowe is difficult to work with idea, which, as I'm watching this, and again this afternoon, I'm thinking, if he had to fight to get this movie to where it is, good.
Well, and
I hate that idea that people are difficult, because they're caring about the product, not so much about themselves in the product.
The perfect example of this, they had an article about Gladiator 20 years in Variety, and one of the things that came up was that first 20 minutes of the movie where he's in the battlefield. Basically, the only thing that was in the script at the time was that he sees a bird on the battlefield, and Ridley Scott and him were talking about, hey, what does this mean to my character? And he goes, that's great, Ridley. I know I see a bird and it flutters, and it's a cute bird on a big battlefield covered in mud and blood. But what am I going to say to the troops? And there wasn't anything written at the time. And then they went back that night and basically hammered out 4 pages, which gets that great speech he gives to the Roman Empire right there at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Unleash hell. I mean, it's amazing. Incredible. Natasha, what do you think?
Another film that, I'm sorry?
Oh no, I was asking Natasha what she thinks of the stories behind the scenes about the script changes. Connie Nielsen, everybody was involved though. That's an interesting thing. They did dinner, drinks, and cigars discussing what had to change.
I come from a theater background, so the idea of doing constant collaboration, I think, is the best way to turn out the greatest product. If you're looking at someone saying, move here, do this, you're going to say this line at this moment, and you give them no reason for why that is the case, you are going to end up with dog shit. Not something that is imbued with love, with respect, with reverence for the material. I'm kind of very glad to hear that there was a lot of collaboration on this script. I know for a fact that at one point when the great father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife speech was written, Russell did not want to give it. He didn't think it was well done. I am a huge fan of John Logan's work. Rich?
Yes.
Penny Dreadful. That's all I need
yes,
to say.
I'll get to it. I mean, people seem to think that, writing on the fly is a disaster. Yes, it can be. From a production standpoint, it can cost a lot of money. And producers don't want to do that. But at the same time, though, for every movie, every couple of movies that were written on the fly, you still get some gems out of them. Case in point, I think the one that we all probably are thinking of, Casablanca, that was written on the fly. That kept going through script revisions. They didn't have an ending for that movie when they started filming, and all-time classic. Same here. Well, so it can be good if there's a nice collaborative atmosphere, and it sounds like ultimately there was here.
Well, and even
blown out of proportion elsewhere.
One of the big things that comes up is one of the major things that happens during production is, of course, Oliver Reed passing away, having a heart attack. That's a big part of the pre-production where they actually have to go in and fix a lot of his scenes. We're going to talk about that in The Legacy. This is one of the few movies where they didn't recast and they did a digitized version for one or two of the scenes. And at the time, it's really noticeable. But now it's not as noticeable. So we'll see what happens there. But it finishes production. It films for 5 months, 19 weeks. So 4 months, roughly under 4 months. And it just, they're happy with it though. It comes out, they release it. We get opening weekend in May of 2000. And it's a hit. Like it grosses $34.8 million opening weekend. It's 18.6% of its gross. It lasts about 5.3 weekends, 5.3 weeks, I should say. It ends up grossing worldwide $452 million. It is one of the first movies that grosses more outside of the United States than it does inside the United States. Grossing 452 million. The adjusted box office is 319 million, which is immense. So it's a major hit. It ends up, it basically sends Russell Crowe on a jetpack, right?
Yeah.
My man.
Yeah, his pulling up his
Are you pulling up his filmography? Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Just ask me. I know them all.
Okay. Name the first 5 movies after Gladiator came out.
Beautiful Mind. Give me a sec. It's been a long time since I've really looked at this. Silver Stallion, I think was early 2000s, otherwise known as, I think, the Silver Brumby. That was done in Australia. I know 2006 he reunited with Ridley Scott for a good year. Okay, that's 3. What else am I missing?
Well, first of all, Silver Bromley was 93.
Really?
We're talking, 2000 forward. Okay, Gladiator.
Gosh, he didn't change in 10 years, baby.
Proof
of Life. Meg Ryan.
Beautiful Mind. Master and Commander, which
everyone loves Master and Commander.
Underrated, absolutely. And then Cinderella Man.
I've seen it. I own them all.
Good Year, 310 to Yuma.
310 to Yuma is incredibly underrated. As a both,
Yuma is one of the better remakes that we have.
Yes, we have a lot of remakes, and that's one of the really good ones, actually.
Oh yeah.
Him and Bale, absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. James Mangold has a little movie coming out in a couple months.
Logan Lerman, fantastic as the son.
But yeah, he this sets him on a rocket ship, right? This gross is impressive. The budget, however, is high. Like its budget is over 103 million. It grosses 187 in the States, right? So it basically covers its budget and its marketing costs in the States, and everything else is pure profit. But it is like it opens big.
Yep.
And it does very well. And it becomes the second highest grossing film of that summer behind Mission Impossible 2. Which is ridiculous. Because that movie is terrible. But you know, it becomes one of the bigger hits for DreamWorks. It actually, you know, in a little bit that we're going to talk about in Legacy, but I want to get this in there. It is one of the first time where DreamWorks shares cost on things. Excuse me. So they share costs. So the production budget isn't all one company. It's right around this time when DreamWorks was working with Paramount and Universal.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the VHS of Gladiator. The opening credits had a marketing piece for Universal Studios. There was the thing for the Jurassic Park and the Lost World re-releases for VHS and DVD, and trailer for American Beauty. So yes, Universal.
The budget is high, but it's not held by one studio. So I think, you know, there's a little bit of a misnomer. Universal did get all of the foreign rights, though. So DreamWorks didn't make as much money on this movie as they could have. If they did by themselves.
Another thing adding to the budget, outside of just period pieces are expensive movies, and especially 2.5 hour long period pieces. Or if you're like me and you watch the extended edition today, 2 hours and 50-minute long period pieces, being expensive, there was a lot in recreating Rome, recreating the Colosseum, recreating the crowds of the Colosseum. A lot of computer effects work being done. Most of it was done by The Mill, which is a British effects house, who actually went on to do, I think, the first couple of seasons of the rebooted Doctor Who. But I'm trying to remember exactly, and I was looking for it a little bit earlier today. I couldn't find it, so I may be mixing this up with something else. But they, for like some of the crowd work and like a lot of like the flags that you see fluttering and stuff like that, they had to develop new software to depict those as realistically as possible, like the flags and that kind of new kind of cloth simulators that they had to come up with. It's ringing a bell. I couldn't track that down though when I was kind of prepping today, and I do apologize. You know, because hey, as Natasha's so fond of saying, I'm getting older now, so this might be my memory playing tricks on me.
That's hard to say that. Not this time.
We're both older apparently. It is what it is. But so it comes out, it gets released. Critical response happens. Now, the interesting thing here is it's part of the Oscar Decade Cavalcade. So we know it opens in May. It's going to get to the Oscars the following year. Again, it's an early release. It's very much an early release summer blockbuster that actually at the time they didn't think it was going to go anywhere near the Oscars. It was too violent. It was too loud. It was, you know, all these things that the Oscars tend to hate. But what I found intriguing is that if you look for it on Rotten Tomatoes, 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is 87. So it's one of those movies where the audience liked it more than the critics and propelled it forward.
You okay there, buddy? Oh boy.
Sorry. having a coughing fit. But yeah, so
Okay.
it is one of those movies where, you know, the critics were on board for what it was as a historical piece, right? Loving movies from the 50s and 60s, kind of going as a throwback with added effects, added bonus. The reviews were all like, they were all very positive. 80% is high, not as high as what we're, you know, some of the things we're seeing. But it is one of the movies where when you look at it critically, it's definitely more of an audience favorite than it is a critic's favorite. That we've looked at some of these Oscar movies, right, Rich?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a crowd pleaser, and ironically enough, because that's all about that's kind of what the text of the movie is itself in certain ways. But
Natasha, you okay? Are you being murdered?
I'm looking at Rich.
Oh, we're going back to this. Okay. Stop looking at Rich. That's very. I thought maybe there was somebody off camera who was plotting your. You're going to get murdered by the Emperor of Rome.
I mean, I remember when I saw
He's
it, I was
already
like,
dead.
When I saw this in theaters, I enjoyed myself. I was like, okay, this is fine. This is good.
It's a spectacle film.
It's a spectacle, but it didn't kind of stick with me too much outside of me thinking, well, there may be some, technical Oscar nominations in its future. And that was about it, though, really. For it to have the impact it wound up having at the Oscars, I think is tremendous. And it shows that
it gets nominated for 5. It gets nominated for 12. It wins 5 out of the 12. And of the movies we've done, it actually, and I'm not like going at it, but it is one of the movies that it wins Best Actor, Best Picture. Ridley Scott gets nowhere near a win for it. It's a weird kind of like,
well, traffic the rest.
Right, it's a movie that directs itself. Kind of ridiculousness, which when you think about it is super weird. It doesn't win the screenplay award. It wins costume design and visual effects, obviously, for the effects of Rome. It's a great movie. And actually what I think is most interesting as we've propelled it along, 23 years later, it has become one of the prime examples of stoic cinema, right? Russell Crowe's performance is all stoicism at its base structure. He's a quiet hero. He doesn't talk a lot. Everything is on screen, is in his face. Like the close-ups on his face, like covered in dirt, whatever, blood, whatever's going on in the scene. But it becomes one of the most stoic performances to win a Best Actor Oscar, because it's not flashy. He delivers lines, but it's not flashy, and I love that.
Every year, Rich and I usually have this conversation when it comes to the Oscars. There's always the flashy performance, and then there's the subtle performance. Oftentimes, the subtle performance is better than the flashier one, but the flashier one is going to get the award. Case in point, Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name versus Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour. Subtle performance versus flashy. Adam Driver, Marriage Story versus Joaquin Phoenix for Joker, which is subtle, which is flashy. That one's obvious. And then you get to this year. Up until the day of the Oscars, I didn't know who was going to win Best Actress. Cate Blanchett for Tar, which is the subtle performance, or Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I literally went in, sat down in Tar. 30 seconds in, I went, fuck me. We have a contender. We have a serious contender. Because during that speech, literally 30 seconds in, I went, I can't see Cate Blanchett. I can't see her. I'm staring right at her. Very little makeup, no flashy set, no flashy costume, and I can't see her. I only see Gladiator. And so sometimes it's nice to see that the Academy goes ahead and recognizes that a stoic performance can be just as strong as anything that is in your face.
And
I also think it's partly for Crowe. It's kind of a defined, like they saw somebody that had, you know, did very well in LA Confidential, and they wanted to reward him and also bring him a little bit forward. It's a good movie. Like, it's a solid movie. That, like, I think it's really cool that the older actors get juicy parts to chew on. You know, Richard Harris is pretty great as the Caesar.
Sir Derek Jacobi.
Derek Jacobi is fantastic as one of the senators.
That's one of his best roles, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I understand.
Digimon Hanson too is in here as the Numidian that Maximus befriends in the gladiatorial arena. I think that's a nice performance. It doesn't get a whole lot to do. It's a lot of physicality in the fights, but the
By the way, if they don't start the second movie with them digging up the little people, I'm not there. I just won't. I can't be there.
I think they'll be in there. I don't think they're digging them out of the fucking.
Oh, it'd be great. It'd be great. That's where it starts. Oh, I need to tell you a story. But I like it's well directed. The screenplay ends up being better than the sum of its parts, right? It basically is, you know, kind of like a testimonial to the 50s and 60s sword and sandal epics. And Ridley Scott does a really good job with the direction. The visual effects are off the charts. It's, you know, that first scene when they're going into Rome and they're playing, it sounds like Enya music on the background. And they're like the, you know, things are waving down and like the Colosseum's in the background, and it's beautiful. I think Crowe's performance is really good. It's star making.
I literally had a thought just now that if this movie had come out in like the late 50s, early 60s during the big sword and sandal epic era, the big widescreen epic era, this would have been like this is a Cinerama film. You know, it just would have been like
in Technicolor. Yes, it would have been in Technicolor.
The widest screen possible.
Can we talk about the color for a second? The way that everything, particularly with the sky, the saturation, it's either to bring a warmth or a coldness. You can tell it's definitely digitally enhanced. And it's one of the first times I think in Y2K where we saw that digital enhancement so much that you're like, okay, this is an aesthetic.
And it's an aesthetic that works for this movie and then was just blanketly copied by a lot of people who didn't utilize it
quite as well. And that is a perfect. That is what
cool.
That is what we call a perfect segue, my friend. Legacy and franchise viability. Obviously, we talked about earlier. They're working.
Like I've been here before.
They've been working on the sequel forever. But without this movie, you don't get 300. You don't get Centurion. You don't get any of those wacky.
Thank you for mentioning Centurion. I think that one gets overlooked a lot. Michael Fassbender, fantastic. Little Mickey the Idiot.
Well, I guess I'm not that old. Guess I'm just young and hip.
You also don't get Spartacus, the TV show, which definitely takes cues from 300.
Was it The Last Legion? Wasn't that one of those?
Yeah, there's a bunch of these movies that come out, but Centurion's the best of the bunch. Like,
I'm a weirdo.
Of the underrated bunch.
I really did sort of like Last Legion. It's not great, but I enjoyed
We're having
it
a
for
talk
what it
later.
was. No, I enjoyed it for what it was, and I'm sorry, Ashwarya Rai fighting Colin Firth is one of the hottest damn scenes I've ever seen.
But you know, sideways legacies on this. Because of the success that DreamWorks has in marketing out to different studios, we get a series of DreamWorks co-productions. So, like, it becomes a whole thing in the 2000s where they're trying to save money and trying to actually like hedge their bets. It works and then it doesn't work. So it's kind of a weird place, but it happens a lot in the 2000s.
And also, do you think Connie Nielsen would have been cast as Hippolyta, the mother of Wonder Woman in the Wonder Woman movie, if she hadn't been in this movie? I think her in that role kind of at least subtly draws a little bit on our association with her in this movie here, and helps sell.
I would say a little. I think you do kind of need that connection, particularly when you're thinking of woman power, swords and sandals. Currently, you think Connie. A couple years ago, I was offered a chance to play Drusilla in a version of Caligula, and based off of our story, there was a lot of parallels, so I turned to Lucilla as inspiration for going into that role. I think that Connie's performance here is quite paramount to when you're looking at future swords and sandals, like Lucy Lawless in the Spartacus TV show. Oh my God, she's definitely drawing from Connie.
I also think that you'd be remiss not to talk about the fact that Joaquin Phoenix, this is the first movie where he really jumps off the screen.
Oh yeah.
And is somebody that you can bank on and go,
this is
that performance, that performance is he's so twitchy in that role. You know, the sequence with the little kid where he's like, looking at the little kid in bed, and then it's like he takes him, he's like talking about different things, and he has his arm around him in a creepy way, and he's all around creepy in the movie. But it's the first performance where you look at Phoenix and go, where he jumps out, where he's like, he's not River's little brother anymore. And it's, it becomes a bigger thing for him.
I saw him in 8mm, and that was the first time I really recognized Joaquin. But then, yes, when we got around to Gladiator, bam,
it's a far cry to be like some porno freak in 8mm and be on screen standing next to Russell Crowe in Gladiator armor and not look like a twerp. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, like
that first scene, the first scene that he is in with Lucilla in the coach. That was I knew it from there. You said creepy, twitchy. He displays all of that throughout this entire movie. He doesn't stop once. You never feel like he falters. You just feel that is who he is.
Yeah, from the moment he chokes out his dad, right up to the point where he's still trying to sleep with his sister, it is a role for the ages.
It's wrong.
But like I said, I think the other legacy things that come out of this, and the franchise viability that comes out of this, they've been trying to make the sequel forever.
I first heard about it in 2016. I think
it's all about giving somebody a chance to try to be like, pick up the mantle, I also do like Crow. I love Crow. The choice of roles after this becomes really interesting. And Rich hit upon it, but Master Commander, if you haven't seen it, you should. It's one of the great action movies ever.
And
I would say too, you can do a sequel because there's a lot of characters with a lot of questions hanging over them after this movie. It's just weird to call it like Gladiator 2 because your lead character is dead. It just strikes me as odd, so I don't know how you do this.
Could they do a Gladiator 2?
No.
May
TOO, a Gladiator 2, TOO.
May I?
I don't know. Go ahead.
Gladiator isn't a person.
It's a state of mind.
Idiots. He's not a person.
It's the friends we made along the way.
No, it's an idea.
It's like whether he's red or yellow, painted red or yellow. No? Okay.
It's an idea, just like the idea that was Rome.
Right, and that's why I think it starts with them digging up the kids, digging up the wife and kid figures, and telling a story. Because Damon Hunt's has always been part of the sequel.
But a story takes you back in time. It doesn't take you forward to the future.
Well, I mean,
unless midway through the film, particularly with Lucilla or Lucius, they have those statues already, and they're
that'd be
explaining
creepy.
Why it is so important to them and why it was important to the person who came before them.
Can I ask a question? Did you ever get a feeling that Lucius was Crowe's?
No.
No? Not once?
Not once.
Huh.
I think I got the idea that he had lost a son. So looking at Lucius as a surrogate, yes. As his own, no.
Fair. Okay.
I don't think we had enough time to really establish one way or another.
So we got some comments. Hold on, let's see. Gladiator is great and iconic, but I much prefer the adult film parody Gladiator. Okay. Whoa.
Yeah,
there's been news about it for nearly a decade. True. Oh, we're getting a lot of porn stuff. Okay. Gladiator 2 Gladiator. But yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to remember at one point there was a Gladiator 2 script floating around. And it was by
you have that, you better send it to me.
No, it's been long since abandoned. Nick Cave was the one who wrote it, the musician. And
really?
Yeah, and I can't remember. I know I didn't read it. It may have crossed my path at one point. I might have it somewhere. But from all accounts, it wasn't that great, or it was kind of weird. So
Russell Crowe originally was planned to star in Gladiator 2 at one point. During the developmental process, there were articles where he said that he was involved in that process. I don't know how he would have returned. And then I did hear reports that Lucius Verus was being looked at, a grown-up Lucius Verus was being looked at to be our lead, to take on that mantle. No fucking clue how, but yes. And it kind of makks sense that now this story, sorry, JW, Pedro will not be the fucking lead. Paul Mescal was the first name announced for Gladiator to play Lucius Verus, which means that they're still sticking with some of the original idea. They're going to announce their main lead first and then start announcing all the others that come afterwards. Rich, I can't hear him. Did we lose audio?
On JW, I think he just muted for a moment because he was coughing again.
That's exactly true. I was muting. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to keep it professional.
It's okay. It looked like you were talking. So.
I was talking. What I said was, I think, I wanted to get done as quickly as possible because Ridley Scott is getting up there. So let's do this before we do any alien films. Let's not do another Prometheus. Let's work on something that people actually want a sequel to. So a couple things. Hercules approach something such as divine interventions. Maybe. I don't think you're going to get that, though. Thanks, Gabe. Feel better, JW. Yeah, I'm struggling through a bronchitis fit right now. But anyway, I think this is a good place to end. Let's start with Natasha. Natasha, where can people find you if they were... Oh, God, I'm sorry.
One moment here, because we didn't hit it with the news, and it is kind of late breaking. And we've talked about this the last couple of weeks.
Are we in a writer's strike?
It looks like we might be having one. The Hollywood Reporter is saying that as of, I guess, within the last hour, the Writers Guild and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers did not emerge with a deal. I mean, they still have till midnight tonight Pacific time to come up with something, but if they've already walked away from the table, writers are putting their pencils down at 11:59 p.m. tonight, and they can be on the picket lines as early as tomorrow afternoon.
I was certainly hoping that the writers and the producers would see their shadows, and we'd have 6 more weeks of production.
Well, that means that development on Gladiator 2 will probably be paused.
Well, no, it won't be paused because they're just going to be writing the script as they're filming it. So
unless they need
like the original, it'll be just like the original.
Yeah.
But yeah,
maybe that's good luck then for it. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be good luck for Gladiator. We
don't
actually write the script. We didn't write the script for the first one. We didn't write this. We kind of wrote it on the fly. You're gonna have to get involved here.
Get John Logan back.
That is a terrible news for anybody who likes entertainment
or
writing or any kind of like television. First shows that will be affected, of course, will be all the late night shows.
Yeah, I was just about to say, enjoy your late night episode of whatever tonight, because tomorrow,
after that, it's all a dry hill. Natasha, with this bad news,
getting to host Saturday Night Live this week. I think we just saw this the series season finale for SNL.
That is rough.
Rich, up my pay, or I'm striking from Cineverse at the end of the week.
There you go. Where can
3
people
times
find
what I
you?
pay you now?
Which is nothing. Where can people find you, Natasha, online? Where can people find, if they found you're engaging with calling us old tonight, where can all other oldies find you online?
They can find me on TikTok. No, I'm kidding. But you can't find me on TikTok. But you can also find me Facebook, Instagram, Cineverse.com as well.
Okay. And you of course host the Big Picture podcast.
Yes,
with this guy here, with this lug over here.
Editor-in-chief, Richard Drees.
Just Rich. We call him Rich around here. But I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Rich, where can people find your stuff online?
Oh boy. Okay.
Got so much.
All my writing is available at filmbuffonline.com. Providing I finish the last 2 paragraphs. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, we'll see the publishing of my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which opens this coming Friday. Spoiler alert, really liked it. Not the best of the 3, but it's really, it's a strong battle amongst all of those.
Well, it's missing Kurt Russell. That's why. And that's what you call a callback, ladies and gentlemen.
Everything comes a wraparound.
My other podcast I host with my very good friend and our current guest here, Natasha Bogutzki. It's called the Big Picture Podcast. You can find it at bigpicturepod.com, or there's a link to it on FilmBuff Online as well. My other podcast,
iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. So either use the link in the show notes, or head directly there, search and hit subscribe.
Yeah, we have a very specific
she
closer.
Should be on every week.
The other podcast that I'm on is Film Scribes. It's the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle, which I am a member of. Our latest episode just dropped today, as a matter of fact. And in it, I participate in a roundtable discussion about Air, Super Mario Brothers, Renfield, Tetris, and Beau is Afraid.
Wait, let's go through this. Air, yes. Mario Brothers, Renfield,
I kind of liked Renfield. I had fun with it. I'm sorry.
I thought Cage was great, but I thought the movie itself was like, I thought it like the movie was all over the place for me.
I liked
Tetris. It didn't know what it wanted to be.
I liked Tetris, and Beau is Afraid.
Oh, Tetris was fantastic.
I think Beau is Afraid is quite possibly a masterpiece, but it needs a couple of rewatches to really be able to dive in there and really pull it apart.
Talking about Beau is Afraid, there was a really interesting article today that I put up from Variety about Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, where the writer of that particular piece is getting bad emails saying he should be calling Beau is Afraid a bigger bomb, which I think is interesting because it's like it was a weird thing because he, like, I guess he responded to the person who sent him the email with, "Hey, I did that last week where I said it's not doing great," and the person responded back with, "That's not good enough. It needs to be called out for what it is," which is a big tanker for A24, which is interesting, and because it's a really interesting article about the Margaret movie, about where it just missed being a hit and being released. Because we have 3 or 4 movies that are in this weird boat this spring, where they got caught in the back wave or in the middle wave of John Wick 4, Scream, and the Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah,
and we're going to be talking about these movies because they're great movies. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Dungeons and Dragons. Honor Among Thieves, which was fantastic.
It was really good.
It was so fucking good, and
these are on the scene just because they're kind of getting blown out by these other.
Well, they're just in between. Like the release dates are weird and wonky. Like we didn't know where to release these things.
I think Go Is Afraid is one of those films that's either going to hit audiences as a masterpiece or a big pile of flaming turd. And
there's no in between.
That comes down to
really
whether or not the audience understands it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's always a problem with the audiences understanding things. I will say that you remind me a little bit. I went to see. I'm trying to think of the movie I went to see. I went to see a movie that was. What was the one? With Sean Penn. I can't think of it. I'm also. I have a head cold right now. The one with Sean Penn, where it was like Brad Pitt, Sean Penn. Year of Life. No.
Tree of Life?
Tree of Life.
Yes, Tree of Life.
Okay, so I remember going to see that movie at Cinemark, and I came out of it, and I'm like, I find him as a filmmaker to be pretentious. I'll say it. I have no problem saying it. And I came out, and there was a young person like Natasha who basically said, maybe you just haven't seen enough movies, to me. And I was like, okay. Explain it to me. Why is it great? Well, because it had all kinds of cool stuff in it, like the dinosaur sequence. And I'm like, okay, what's the point of the movie? Well, it's a treatise on human life, and it's like, okay.
I think when it comes down to whether or not something is that good, even when there is a generational gap, it depends on how well someone's willing to back up their argument. They're using words like cool.
I'm going to give you credit here. You were right about Fletch.
Fuck off.
You're right about Fletch. Fletch is one of the great comedies of the last 20 years that we're going to have, and it didn't hit at all. And Rich and I are so disappointed that movie didn't hit. You have no idea. But on a side note, Natasha, every single person I've showed that are rich or younger or my age and younger, love it.
Are we talking about Fletch or Confess Fletch?
Confess Fletch. Yeah.
Okay. I still haven't watched either. I've heard good things about them. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that.
I'm saying you're right.
Hang on.
I'm saying you're right.
The failure of whether or not Confess Fletch did well is on the production company for not marketing it.
Oh yeah, I agree. Be roasted in hell.
Drawn and quartered. Absolutely drawn and quartered.
I
got to tell you, I think that's one of those movies. Rich and I have discussed this. Confess Fletch is one of those movies that I tell other people to watch.
Even the DVD, which just came out about 2 weeks ago, bare bones. It's the movie and that's it. No trailer, no featurette, no anything.
Be happy you got physical media.
And I asked Greg Matola when he posted that the DVD was coming out. I asked him on Twitter. I was like, "Any chance for a commentary?" And he replied back because I was like, asked him within 2 minutes of the post.
One of the 6 people that saw the movie.
I said, "Any chance of a commentary?" He said, "John and I offered to do a commentary track, and they declined. They didn't want it.
Yeah,
So,
John Hamm gave up a lot for that role.
Of course they're not going to want it.
I got to tell you, John Hamm gave up so much of that role and reading side notes. But I will say, Natasha, what I would say to you is you were correct about that, Natasha. Totally right. But the interesting thing is it's getting passed around by people our age all the time now. It's hilarious how much that movie's getting passed around. Like, it's unbelievable. It's like a VHS tape in the 80s getting passed around. Where you got to watch it. You got to see it. You have to see it. It's amazing. It's different. Because the Fletch we grew up with was like over the top, and this one is perfectly in line with the books.
It's a little bit more sly.
And Hamm is fantastic.
There are some movies that I think are just, they're either really fun or they're works of art. They just didn't hit at the time. But obviously through DVD sales and streaming, it's an underrated gem has been picked back up. And two of the films that I would absolutely recommend, one is going to be a little more artsy. The other one's going to be a little more popcorn. The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky, which did not do well at the box office when it came out. And a lot of people didn't freak out.
Yeah, a rare case where Hugh Jackman could not get people in seats.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw it. It came out. Didn't it come out around Thanksgiving time? I feel like I saw that like the Wednesday.
Yeah,
the night
it was like 2004. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was you and 3 turkeys in the front row trying to avoid Thanksgiving. And me.
Also, the other one I would recommend is Guy Ritchie's The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Actually, a reboot film based off of original IP TV show. And it's brilliant. It is so much fun.
It's pretty good.
I would say Armie Hammer, Henry Cavill have, you want to talk about machismo going back and forth between those two. The sets are beautiful. The soundtrack's fantastic.
We are never getting a sequel.
I know we're not.
Which is a shame.
It is a shame. It was a great movie.
Yes,
but,
it is good. I was actually one of the few people in the seat opening night. There was 5 people in that cinema. It was not marketed well. It did not do well. And unfortunately, we will never see the rest of it.
It is on HBO every 3rd day now, though. So it's bound to. It's on HBO all the time. Like it's a Warner Brothers movie, and it like we're just gonna run this until you watch it. Please watch it.
Please watch it. It's good.
But more importantly, can we get back to my plugs? Because I still had a few. Finish
your plugs.
Don't roll your eyes, because the next plug is if you happen to be in the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area next Friday, you may want to check out an event at WVIA called the Lyman Howe Silent Film Festival. It's actually put on with the Luzerne County Historical Society, drawing attention to one of the very first silent film distributors in film history, Lyman Howe, and how he was based in Wilkes-Barre. There's going to be a great documentary that I've seen before by one of the historians who has done like a lot of research on this guy. It's a great film that she's put together. And then this wonderful short film that Natasha directed and I produced called 8 Years with Gilda is part of the program also, along with 2 or 3 other short films from some filmmakers in the area. They're all really great guys and gals. And it's at WVIA. I think the tickets are free. You can find that information on Facebook, where you can also find the Film Buff Online page. And I can be found on Twitter as Film Buff Rich.
So you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, JW the Movie Guy. I also do a show called Loud Nerdy that's not on the Indiescape Network as of right now. And basically I do all kinds of stuff there. Also Twitter, Instagram, all those places. Now, we are off next week. It is a built-in week off for us. But I will say that we will be beginning a brand new summer blockbuster kind of roll of films as we get ready for the big films that are coming out this summer. Specifically The Flash and specifically Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
No, Barbie.
We don't have films that lead into Barbie, though.
Yeah, well, like what? You want to do a Transformers? No, nobody's doing
How
that.
about all the animated Barbie movies?
No.
How about no?
The first four are actually pretty
But
good.
Rich and I have talked about this. We're going to be doing a lead up to the
Oppenheimer.
No. We're going to be doing a lead up to both Batman's Michael Keaton's return in The Flash with the original Batman Returns, and Birdman. And then we're also going to be doing a lead up to Indiana Jones' Dial of Destiny with all 4 of the Indiana Jones films getting the Generation movie treatment. So that gives us 7 weeks. We take a week off next week. We'll hit right around the time Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny opens. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Natasha, for joining us tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Natasha.
One more comment. Wait, did you say as of right now? Nice. God, I was hoping Joe didn't notice that. Joe is always on me. As of right now, yeah. I maybe it was done just to give Joe hope. Everybody have a great week. Guardians of the Galaxy, the beginning of the summer blockbuster season starts. Have a great week. Go see a movie. Watch something good. Mrs. Davis. Everybody should be watching Mrs. Davis. Have a great day. Stay safe.